All right, today we have Nosferatu with us. That's not his real name, but he is an active reservist in the Finnish military, and he is very knowledgeable about the Finnish Defense Forces and NATO, and with an interest, of course, in the Ukrainian setup. And why we're here today to have him on the call is because we want to, and he's a secret, that's why he has this weird name, but we have him on the call because we want to understand what the similarities and differences are with the Ukrainian and NATO armies. Because many times we learn about Ukraine, there's so much to learn about Ukraine, but then we're mostly when we're selling towards NATO or working with NATO armies with our tech, we get there's an easy like translation mistake or misunderstanding between how things are done in NATO and how in Ukraine. Because there are many similarities, and Ukraine are ahead in many things. I would say drones is one of them, but organizational structures and way to fight might be very different, and we need to know these nuances in order to develop great products. That's why we have Nosferatu here. And to get started, the first question is then we hear that Ukraine is changing their setup from a brigade led setup where there's a ton of brigades and then they have a central command. I think they had a middle section with like 3 sub central commands of the whole Eastern Front, which is and like a lot of they work with like 100 brigades each or something, some ridiculous amount like this, and they're going into a core structure. So we're going to start this discussion on that and see how that compares to how NATO does it, and then take it from there. So Nosferatu, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Right. So tell me. So I sent you a video as I wanted you to reflect on, and I want to hear your thoughts on like what's happening there on the core structure and how does it, like what's your reflections on what they're trying to do there in Ukraine?
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting setup for the Ukrainian armed forces, mainly because let's not forget they're at war, full-scale war. So they're developing under pressure. This is something that has been going on for a few years already, as you could see in that video as well, which I'm not going to reference too much because our audience might not have seen it, but they've actually gone from sector structure to strategic groups to tactical groups all the way from the year 2014. And let's be honest, 2014 is when the war really started in Donbass during the Crimean crisis. So they've been doing this, developing under pressure all this time, meaning you might not be as effective in renewing as you would otherwise.
Why would they renew? Like everybody hasn't seen the video, but like, can you give me an idea? You use all these words, tactical group, and I don't even know what that means. So can you tell me a bit more of what's going on? What's the problem here?
Sure. The big problem that they're trying to solve is a way to centralized command, right? So what you mentioned before, where they have, let's say, 20 brigades under one commander that would take on all of the orders, that would do all the planning, that would validate any battle plans. It's not a very agile structure. It's not going to be very easy for them to wage war, if you will. They're trying to move away from that. The reason why they might have had that is there might be a few reasons, actually. One is corruption. You want to avoid splitting power. If you have a corrupt system, you want to centralize it to one guy.
Oh, I can see. Yeah. So then I know, like, at least I know I'm not corrupt. At least I know that if I give the direct order, like I can kind of check that there's not all kinds of hands in between my orders and things start to change on the way.
Yeah.
And I'm so difficult to track. Wait, who did what and why did this go wrong? Where is all my equipment?
Yes, either that or the other way around, where if you are corrupt, you want to centralize power to yourself, meaning that you don't want any of these other 22 brigades seizing power for themselves.
So it's a win-win.
So that's why you have a lot of these smaller groups. I say small, even though we're talking about brigade size, so that's 3,000 to 5,000 people, but it's still not a big enough autonomous unit to seize power in the entire country, right? That means you can hold power in a centralized command. So that's one reason why they might have had this problem. The other one is historical. Let's keep in mind Ukraine is the former satellite state of the USSR. Their armed forces started from their independence in 91 by what was remnants of contingents units that were left there, right? Meaning they've built onto a system that isn't necessarily their own. Now they're coming into, okay, what is the needs of Ukraine? What do we need to change to win this war and have a believable defense?
But what's wrong with having 20, like let's say I'm some type of commander there, whatever they would be called, and I have 20 brigades under me. Like I don't see why is that a problem. I mean, they've been fighting like this for 3 years or so. What's the problem with that?
Well, that worked quite well in 2014 when you had longer pauses between engagements. You might have had fewer incidents in general. There was time in between to have that chain of command go through all the different parties in between to reach central command, create some kind of response, and then send it back. That's fine if you're not waging a war. But as the war picked up and you needed to have faster decision making, more agile forces, and first of all, more adaptability, that's when they started to have a need for something more closely related to what we have in NATO and Finland, for example.
Yeah. Well, can you give an example to that? Because it's hard for me to understand. I mean, most of us who have been soldiers of some sort, we're not on the brigade level
Yeah.
at all, So I'm wondering. I still okay. There's 20 brigades. It's like how many would NATO have with the same person trying to coordinate things?
That's a good question. So a general rule of thumb in most of the NATO defense forces and member countries is that no military unit, no commander should have more than 3 subordinate units to lead. 3 is a good number. It also fits very well into our general way of working. You would have 1 unit that is in active duty, that's doing something on mission. You would have 1 unit in reserve, just in case you need to fill gaps or do some nice moves, and then you would have a 3rd one resting. And these 3 units that are your subordinate units would then be controlled by you, which is also I think we might get back to later on during this call, and they would switch with each other, right? So every once in a while, your unit would rest and my unit would be on mission, and then when I get back from mission, it's your turn. Meaning you have a possibility with the same guys that you have in your brigade or your battalion or your regiment as a commander of that unit, you can use those same guys for weeks on end, months on end, without them getting overly tired, because you have a very rigid way of making sure everyone gets a rest period, right? That's very hard to do if you have 22 brigades and a centralized command. What tends to happen is you fill up with the most capable unit every time, every place, because there's no time to train either. You're at war, and B, your leadership system, your command structure is too prolific for you to have any proper control. So you take shortcuts. What's the easiest shortcut? The easiest shortcut is you use the best unit you have, because you know they can get the job done, right?
Yeah, there was in a
Meaning,
situation, was it, I mean, a week ago or 2 weeks ago or something, there was they were about to do, the Ukrainians were about to do an envelopment of a Russian had a breakthrough, and then Ukraine would like to cut it off, like make kind of a simple pincer movement, because if you have a breakthrough, you're exposed. And they were about to do it, I think, with the 3rd Azov Assault Brigade. And then Russians made a second breakthrough somewhere, and they had to redirect. They decided to redirect the Azov, because it was basically, they were fleeing that there was some territorial brigade or something that was just they were shattered. And apparently I think they had been there, and in this case I think they had been there for, was it 2 or 4 months without rotation in the front line. And I'm like, how is this? Yeah, I mean, they're tough guys to sit it out like that, but eventually you can't do it anymore.
No, especially not in a war like this one, where it's a war of attrition, because you're going to lose more and more guys. You're going to have to send the unit back at some point to recuperate, to fill the ranks. What do you do then when you haven't trained any other unit than the one that you've used time and time again?
But I mean, it doesn't sound too hard to just, in my opinion, just, okay, let's make it so that we have 3 brigades per commander. Just split, just make it the division, everybody split like this, and let's continue. Why is that such a problem? Why wouldn't they just do that?
Well, that might be the other symptom, actually. So good question. What do you do if you don't have enough qualified guys? What if you don't have enough qualified commanders? That's a big historical topic of discussion. I'm not going to go into that too much, because I don't have the insight on their background. But I do know this is something we've covered before. We've had few different sources that have said the same as well, that the Ukrainian armed forces are lacking good commanders.
Yeah, so even if they would, if they would do this, they say they need another 30 brigadier general, whatever the level will be, some type of general they would need for this or something. They don't have to. They can't pick. There's not that many qualified people, so it doesn't. So they're just basically stuck with this problem then. Well, they're doing they're making two core structures now, two of them, right? One around I think the Kharkiv brigade, and the other one around the Azov brigade. I think that's how they decided to do it.
Yeah, I think they're going to add on to those as well. There's going to be more than two cores, but in general, the big ticket item here is to have bigger autonomous units. So,
what's your reflection? I want to hear your reflection on when you see how they fight. We can go broader now. You see how they fight. What are you picking up? Like, wow, this is a really good thing that they're doing, and you'd be like, oh wow, this is very different. We would never do it like this. Can you give me some pointers on that?
Yeah, so maybe the most critical thing that I've personally reacted to is the fact that they don't have ownership of troops on their AORs. So AOR is area of responsibility. In the NATO way of waging war, you would have one commander with one AOR. So this is your plot of land. You are responsible for everything that happens on this plot of land. Now, this is a simplified version. If you're that commander and I'm telling you this is your plot of land, obviously you might have air support from somewhere else. You might have artillery from somewhere else. But in general, all the operational forces on your plot of land will be under your command.
How large are we talking? Is this like a Russian doll? Like everything gets just smaller and smaller, and everybody down to like a platoon or a group have a area of responsibility, or what do you call it? How is this structured?
Actually, yes. So you would go all the way from a piece of the front that would be given to, say, a Army Corps in this example. And that Army Corps would then divide itself into different subunits. And all of those subunits would then get a smaller piece of that same area of the front. But each commander of each unit would be given a very clear plot of land. This is your responsibility. And the way we do it is we also make very clear to the commander, these are your closest neighbors. You should work together with them. Meaning, as a commander, you are not allowed to go into other commanders' areas. You're supposed to trust that they will do as good a job as you are. While in the Ukrainian system before, what they did poorly, in my opinion, is they would have never-ending switches in command. So you would have the same plot of land that we're talking about here, but the commander wouldn't be the same. Or you might have the same commander, but different troops coming through that this commander didn't have ownership of. So
wait, so in the Finnish system, if somebody like enters my area, or like he's under my command because I'm responsible for this piece of the front, and if you're in there doing something, I'm commanding you.
Yeah, that's the basic rule of thumb. But if in the Ukrainian system previously, if you, Rasmus, would be the commander, you might have been given a task to handle area of responsibility from Helsinki to, let's say, Espoo. It's a bad example, but just to point it towards a map. Rasmus, your area of responsibility is Helsinki to Espoo. Good, you're responsible for everything that happens there. And then once you've gotten there, once you're situated, you're happy, you're like, okay, I can do this, this is good. All of a sudden, someone comes in and says, hey, Rasmus, I'm on your area now. I'm going to do this and that. Good, ciao. That's it. That's not going to.
So suddenly you have somebody else comes in and will have some other objective inside of my.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which will immediately affect your ability to perform properly, because you have a higher risk for blue on blue. You have units that might use the same routes that you are using. You have to be very assured on where are, for example, mines, stuff like this. Where do you want to put your own units? Everything becomes so much more complicated if
I think just using the roads. I think because that's an issue, like to getting the material where you need to go. And if you clog up the roads, and they are difficult to trap, I mean, they get hit all the time, and all. So I'm just wondering, just getting people to use the roads correctly would be an issue if you're doing this.
Yeah.
All right. So that, I mean, and I know they're making core structure, but they're not done yet. So I think this, I think this is problem currently also on the front. I think they haven't solved it. But yeah, I think that's a huge. So yes, that's one thing. Is there anything else you want to pick up to see like the way they're fighting differently in a way that you would? Because I want us all to use you as a translator now. What am I seeing in Ukraine is not. I shouldn't think that's how it is in the NATO army.
It's an interesting question because on the one hand, we can say pretty categorically that a NATO army would do things differently. On the other hand, every single career officer within NATO will be looking at Ukraine now and going, okay, what can we learn from this, right? I think quite many were surprised by the fact that this war was so stagnant. It was a war of attrition more than a maneuver warfare. If you look at modern Western armies, maneuver warfare has been the goal. For any listener that isn't familiar with maneuver warfare, what you mean when you say maneuver warfare is essentially you want to go away from this two-line us against them thinking that you might have seen in movies about Second World War, where you have trenches, like in Ukraine now, and you just stay in your trenches and you send a few smaller attacks now and then, or drones like they do in Ukraine. Maneuver warfare is not like that. Maneuver warfare has a primary principle of sowing confusion, disorganization. So quick movements. You're not necessarily not just trying to destroy the enemy. You're trying to inflict problems for their planning. You're trying to make it harder for them to organize themselves. So it's much more quick. It's much more. It's an interesting way of waging war. You want to take positions of advantage. You want to have decentralized control. It's more of like a guerrilla mindset, right? And that's something we haven't seen in Ukraine too much, and I think many are surprised by that.
Well, if I'm looking, maybe it was more possible, say in the beginning, but now I think the front on the east is manned by like 2-3 million Russian soldiers or something like this. And I might get the number wrong, and the Ukrainians have like 1 million, I think. But I think the ratio is like 2-1, basically, whatever they have. Is it 4-2 or something? But so I wouldn't say there's, even if they could. I mean, there aren't many gaps around, are there? Because it's just people everywhere.
Yeah, and I think the drones have been an interesting new sort of leading star that has affected warfare. The fact that you cannot move too much because you're always under drone threat. The fact that the logistics chains are longer because you're always under drone threat. The fact that singular soldiers, servicemen are sitting in trenches just waiting because of the drone threat. It's an interesting combination of trench warfare and something else. And this something else, I think, is what NATO officers are looking at now. How can we use our advanced systems if the people that are supposed to use them are sitting in a trench hiding because of a 50-euro drone, possibly being swarming overhead?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting setup, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it scares the shit out of me. I'd be like, and what worries me even more is that with my training that I got, if I was thrown in, I mean, it was not too long ago, say 15 years ago or so. If I was thrown into a trench now, or like thrown into the front line, I wouldn't know how to fight the drones correctly.
Yeah.
That what bothers me, that it's not a completely logical way that, I mean, if I see an enemy, I would shoot him, or throw grenades or whatever I might be doing. That to me makes sense. But if the drone, for example, what if it's like so far away I can't shoot it? Or what, like, and I've even heard also that in Ukraine that 50% of all the drones shot down by rifles is like their own drones. And they're jamming. Oh, that's another thing about the areas of responsibility. They are jamming and shooting their own drones to some ridiculous amount of blue and blue on the drones, because any guy sitting in a trench hears a drone who's like, that drone's gonna die. Like, they don't want to have any drones near them if they can avoid it. But I'm like, that's your own. It just the chaos of it. I'm just hoping we're not gonna fight like that. But I mean, who knows? It might be the reality.
I'm afraid we probably are going to, and I'm not surprised on the blue and blue on drones. If you've ever worked with drones before, especially a bit more professional drones that can go up to a high enough level, altitude, you're not going to see them. There's not going to be, if you remember from the very first weeks of the war, if I take another example, the very first weeks of the Ukrainian war, what happened with the regular servicemen? They started using colorful tape. They started to tape their arms and their legs in colors. Remember these? We had blue tape, there was yellow tape, there was green tape. The reason for that was to avoid blue on blue. You can't do that on a drone. It's not going to be visible anyways when it's 200 meters up in the air, right?
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And they're agile, they move fast, they move in a, after all, up in the air, it's unrestricted territory. They don't have to use roads. They don't have to watch out for enemy troops in the same way you would when you navigate terrain on foot or in a vehicle. Meaning,
I think we're getting to how this core structure makes sense, or like how the command makes the problem. Because you could say between 10 and 10, let's say between 11 and for 11:15, there will be drones flying over you, and they're our drones. So they just, if you see them flying just past you, that they're ours, just leave them be. They could give some type of order like that, and that would help. But if they don't have that capability, if they don't know, nobody can say whose drone it is because somebody else is flying them somewhere. I can see why that also results in them being shot down, because it's almost impossible to know who it is.
Exactly. And actually, what you mentioned right there is another good reason for Ukraine to go into core structure and this autonomy, which is a bit different to how we fight in modern Western armies, which is mission command way of fighting. Mission command comes from 17th century Prussia. It's something that's then been tested in Germany as well, both world wars. They called it Führung mit Auftrag. It's a hard thing to say, but essentially what it means is if you're commanding a unit, your boss, your commander would give you a task. This is your area of responsibility. This is what I want you to achieve. Preferably, that's it. Preferably, he wouldn't tell you anything else. The rest is up to you. That's a mission command way of handling your forces, of waging war, right? That's something that is very, very hard to do if you have 22 brigades. That's something that's very, very hard to do if you have centralized command, because it requires the singular unit to be able to make their own decisions. It requires, or actually enables, the kind of agility where if something has changed, if you see on the battlefield, once you're there, that our previous plan doesn't work anymore, it's not realistic, you're supposed to be able to change it. And you can't really do that with a centralized command, because once a singular unit commander comes out to the battlefield, he realizes the scenario has changed, he notifies central command. The time it takes for that information to go all the way up, for that information to be deducted and disintegrated into smaller parts, analyzed, and then made into a new decision, a new order, and then all the way back down through the chain of command. What happens? The situation on the battlefield has changed once more, and then you're in like a negative loop all the time. So that's maybe the biggest reason why Ukraine is going now to a core structure, to enable this modern way of fighting with mission command.
Yeah, and what you just said, I mean, if it happens with one brigade, or like, it's not the worst, but I'm like, yeah, but that would maybe happen with half of them. So now the central command has to take into account 20 new variations, which now causes like it sounds like it becomes a mental bottleneck. Basically, you can't manage it. You as you said maybe in the beginning, if it was 2014, and there's some combat here, some combat there, but you can manage it because it's not continuously ongoing, and it doesn't. There's not 20 in combat at all the time. But if we have a live and a living front with all these units involved, it just becomes impossible basically to well, you can do the shorthand, like, okay, I send the Azov brigade, they'll fix it, and you just send them every time because that's all you have time to think. You just do it. But then you exhaust them, for example, because you don't have a good rotation system.
And you can imagine what the level, the quality of planning that you'll get from centralized command as well, because to do a good plan when you're not on the front yourself, it requires a lot of information. So centralized command hypothetically would wait for a long time to gather this information. They would ask for extra information. They would have follow-up questions from the soldiers on the ground, right? Then they would get that, then they would make the plan, and then they'd send it back without ever having seen the battle themselves. They're always going to operate on secondhand information, which means if you're going to try to make as good a plan as possible, but it's never going to hold up.
Yeah, they have their troubles. Is there something that you think that they're doing that we would benefit from copying? To say like this is actually something that I'm interested in that we could maybe use.
Well, we talked earlier about their military intelligence and the way that they've been able to become a force multiplier. So I think this is hopefully something that all Western armies are capable of, because it should come as a reflex. It's not necessarily something that you train, it's something that stems from your overall capability. The fact that we're well trained, the fact that we have a good, in Finland, for example, conscription, meaning that everyone pretty much knows the basics at least. I think that sets a good standard for us to innovate as well when shit hits the fan. And that's what the Ukrainian armed forces have been very, very good at, especially in military intelligence. They have been able to work very well. They've been able to sow quite major destruction and very nicely executed operations with quite limited resources. And that's something that's not very common with a conventional army. It's not very common with conventional forces. It's more of a free-for-all. Hey, what can we do? And then you sit around, you play war games, you think what's the craziest stuff we can come up with, and then when it works, I think that's very cool. That's something we could really benefit from here as well.
Yeah, nice. All right, is there something you would like to share with the audience here about that? We're talking about the military tech development, defense tech development. Something you would like to share that you find interesting that you think people should have in mind?
I wouldn't know if it's interesting. What I'm thinking about myself quite often regarding the development of military technology right now is it's actually quite sad. It seems right now there's money everywhere. If you want to develop something that's dual use, if you want to develop something in defense technology, go right ahead. There's going to be someone investing in it. Look back 5 years and compare the numbers. And then when this war in Europe is over, it will be interesting to see, is it going to be as prolific in the defense development as it is now? In my experience, it's been one of those industries, those areas where we really don't want to think about it. We don't really develop too much. We're happy with what we've got until shit hits the fan, and then we realize, well, we need to do something. So that's my key takeaway of military tech development or defense tech development at the moment. That yes, it's very good, but let's keep the momentum up when the war's over as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that as long as there's also government spending in this area, I think there will be an interest continuously. And we have learned, well, who knows how long this learning will last, but we've learned that the tech development is part of the game. And if we can't do it well, and we cannot implement new technology well, we will gonna lose. So I hope that too. All right. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming to the podcast. And I thank everybody for listening to this. And I'm happy to have this conversation once more. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.